I wonder, like, if you, like me, maybe others, have thought about what happens after a near-death experience, how that can affect your life, right? How it changes the way people live. We've had folks speak to near-death experiences before on earlier episodes, and it's always fascinating. But, in this specific episode, my friend Saladin Frank Pelfrey shares with us his near-death experience and the way how it was a mystical event in his life, and it really transformed his life in profound ways.
Yeah, together, Ana Luisa, Joaquil, and Saladin explore fear of death, spiritual awakening, grief, consciousness, and rituals that can help people approach mortality and the arising awareness of that through these near-death experiences with greater honesty, presence, and connection.
Yeah.
With some specific attention given to what happens during those near-death experiences, spiritual transformation after trauma, personal mystical experiences, some just good stories, I'm sure,
Yeah.
in Saladin, processing grief, mortality, finding meaning through those processes, and then life after near-death experiences. So whether you have had your own near-death experiences or trying to understand or support a loved one or someone in your life who has, or simply questioning what it means to live fully with a present and maybe pressing awareness of your own death and mortality, this episode could offer a grounded and compassionate conversation in service of those topics.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you again. I am the Reverend Joaquil David Matthews. On this episode, we're really excited to speak with my dear friend and teacher, Saladin Frank Pelfrey. He has been on a spiritual journey that began when his life was completely changed, he tells us, by a seminal mystical experience at the age of 23. He was a yoga and pranayama teacher in Spokane in the early 70s. And at that time, they were already discussing what it means to die and talking about that in groups. And so we'll find out more about that. And we're looking forward to it.
Yes, indeed. And I am the Reverend Mother Ana Luisa Armendariz. And Saladin has connected with the Sufis, and that has been his path for nearly 6 decades. He incorporates all the wisdom from his Buddhist and Vedanta work and is a teacher, minister, and guide in the Sufi tradition. He currently lives in the Bitterroots of Montana and is retired from his career as a clinical psychologist, living a life of curiosity. He feels that worshiping in nature has been rich beyond measure.
Exactly. Great. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us today, Saladin. Really appreciate you.
My pleasure.
So yes, welcome. And let's talk about what has been your earlier work and how it's influenced your ways of thinking about death and dying.
Well, the seminal experience that I referred to when you mentioned that at 23 was a death experience, very significant. And maybe I'll just come back to that later. But I worked as a clinical psychologist. I ended up being a director of mental health centers mostly in Idaho. And I have worked with people in the process of death, of dying. I've been in workshops in the early 70s, and it just feels like it's the forgotten place in our culture.
Yeah.
And following a mystical tradition, I think it's essential that we dance with it. That's a very to the point answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Well, and we would like to hear more about that experience that you had. But I also wanted to ask you, well, why don't you tell us more about that? And then I'd like to have you talk more about the ritual that you and I talked about when we were together a week ago or so, that you've done to have people go through dying, what it's like to die. So maybe you could put those two together.
Sure, you bet. So I was been out of the Army for a while, and I took a job as an electrical technician in LA for a company putting in hidden cameras in banks and places like that. And I had only been in LA for about 3 months, maybe 4. And it was in August 31st, and I was going north on the San Diego freeway, is what they called it, but I was going north into Hollywood to a bank. And the company truck, it was a small bobtail truck. It had problems with the engine. It cut out on the highway, on the freeway, and there was not much traffic. So I just kind of cruised along on the far right. But what I noticed was way behind me was a large sand and gravel truck. And he was traveling around 70 miles an hour, and he was daydreaming and ran right into me. And I was doing about 5 miles an hour. So it was a very, I explain it because we have accidents, but this was pretty traumatic accident. When I went back eventually later to look at the truck, it was frightening. Anyway, during that time, I had, according to the first responders that come, I was not breathing. I had absolutely no pulse rate, no pulse, find no pulse. And my pupils were fixed and dilated. And if you are familiar with those hallmarks, they pretty much say you're not around. And so, and it wasn't just for 30 seconds. It was like for several minutes. And in that time, when I did come, when I had a choice, the choice was I finished. And the I'm trying not to get too much into a lot of esoteric information right now, but the I was the I am, the large I, not the small I of Saladin.
The boober eye.
Right. And so I'm posed I, the consciousness, the pure consciousness opposed with, are you finished? No. And so I did not, leaving that, if you will, not being in that state anymore, was not what I did not want to leave it. I mean, I just to share right now, it's a profound state of being, of conscious being. It's the most incredible state of emerging of pure love and pure peace. And there's a knowingness that goes with it. So after several minutes, I come to in the accident. I crawl out of the accident. By that time, the police are there. They're all around going on. And I walk up to them, and they were pretty astounded. They were more than astounded. They were, because later I was at emergency center at UCLA, and the man who came to talk to me and bring me back my wallet, my shoes, my wristwatch, all that had come off in the accident. It was pretty profound. And he just said, I don't know what to say, because I was a first responder. I'm trained. You were not here, so to speak. Yeah. And I knew it. I just agreed with him. I just said, you're fine. Not an issue. I understand. Yeah. But from then on, I knew that somewhere my life had changed dramatically. And part of it was this area that both of you are sharing with people right now across the world. Yeah. And so, but mine was to do it more individually, although along the way, a number of years ago, what you and I were speaking to earlier, a week or so ago when I saw you, was that I would have in the summertime a person that is part of the Sangha, the group of folks that are part of my Sangha, and she had a large property that had a place to dig that was really well, and so my practice for people was I would take them there, I'd have them dig their grave. They actually. With shovels, and they had to dig it where it was deep enough where they couldn't see over the top. So it had to be probably 2 feet at least. And then we would go inside, we would eat, and then by late afternoon, we'd go back, and people would sometimes put a pad on the ground or whatever, but they lay in the grave. They lay in their grave, and I would do about a 2-hour guided meditation on dying, and your body decomposing, all of it from beginning to end. And part of the practice then was to fall into that meditation, and then there's a practice in the mystical tradition that we follow. It's called Sufism, called zikr, and I have people do that all night until they fall asleep, and they mostly fell asleep.
Yeah.
And then when the sun would come up, I would yell out a prayer and to them and wake them. And then I would have them stay in their grave, and I would do another guided meditation for about an hour. And this is to bring them back into their body and to become aware of all the sensate experiences that you have in your body, touch, smell, sight, so on. And then people would come out of their grave, fill it in. Then we'd go inside our friend's house, break fast, and then we would talk about it. After we ate, we would talk about it. We'd share experiences. We would look at how we want to take that further into our lives for them to be able to embrace death, to understand it. And we did this for a number of years in Idaho, which is where I was at the time. And that was essentially the practice. There's other practices that we do in our tradition. I'm sure, Wakilda, you're familiar with them. Amal is one of them called. And in the Sufi tradition, like most any mystical tradition, we have a way of talking about death. We say mukta kabla anta mukta, die before you die. And it is a way of giving you a sense of what it's like to be not the little I, not the little self, but be the I am.
Yeah, let that go. Yeah.
Great stuff. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We just were talking a little bit ago about, I think it's a samurai practice of every day waking up and imagining what it would be like to die. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And also that book that I mentioned, it's Living in the Light of Death, on the art of truly being alive. And the whole practice that I learned in 2002 was exactly that, just like meditating and watching your body dissolve and go back to the earth, and then just really being with the awareness of not being.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really is kind of, as you said, that's kind of the work we're engaged in, is trying to normalize this conversation so that people aren't afraid of it. And it's a really wonderful practice that you're talking about. So appreciate that a lot. And thanks for being willing to share that with us. I wish we had 2 hours so you could take us through the meditation, but it probably wouldn't be a good idea right here.
Actually, I would say it is not something I'd want to share publicly, because I think that it brings a lot of different kinds of emotions or fears or anxieties for people. And unless you have the right container that you're there, can witness it, I think it creates more trauma than support.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you definitely want to do it in a facilitated way. So appreciate you doing
I
that.
will want to comment on that also, because it's a very intimate. Death.
Yeah.
One of my favorite poems has to do with the intimacy of death by Rabia. And the intimacy of doing that practice. The intimacy of doing that practice is profound, and to know that you have to know the individuals that you're leading in that. I never would have somebody come and be involved with that practice that I didn't know. Death has too many tangents it can hook onto with a person's perception of their being in their life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and when I was training to be a hospice volunteer, we had like a 3-day volunteer orientation. But on the last day, I think that we had to write our letter to our loved ones as though we had just died. And then we had to do a meditation. It was a beautiful, not long meditation for us to imagine how our death would be and who each would want. And so we all, did this meditation and we wrote it down. And then this wonderful facilitator, made sure, like, is everybody, she had us come back and be present, move around, get back in our bodies. But I really appreciated that even as a non-spiritual foundation place, there was a lot of making certain that people weren't left behind in that space where they're still dying or were dead. And, I wonder if there's like some bits of trauma out in the world when people want to do these things willy-nilly and not recognize, like Saladin said, who are these people in front of you? Where are they on their journey? How equipped are they to, be either bludgeoned or welcomed into this essence of who, thou am.
Yeah. Well, we also talked earlier today about grief ritual, and sometimes those can be similarly done in a less responsible way, where you don't have somebody there to facilitate, you don't have somebody there to be present, and you don't have a process to let people work through their grief and not get stuck. And I've seen examples of that where people came out of a grief ritual that wasn't done very well in a totally disturbed and upset state, where they probably should have spent a lot more time talking to somebody or spending more time. I mean, it's so important to do this with presence and wisdom and facilitation, and not just to do it because it's a good idea. Right. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to just kind of also say the act of creating a grave is an incredible life-affirming practice. And the healer I've worked with and trained with for years, we had 13 different practices or rituals for different kinds of soul loss that one might encounter. And in community, when a woman is sexually abused, she gathers 13 other women and she digs her grave, and the women bury her and do a certain prayer, and then they unearth her and have her be born again as a form of reconnecting with your soul and leaving what is not yours in the ground. And so it is really powerful medicine to be in our mother in a whole and be.
Yeah. And we as we mentioned in the introduction, the connection to nature is what does so much. Pretty much every time we ask somebody what do they do to take care of themselves, they say, I get out in the woods. And I know for sure that Saladin, that's the case for you. So
yeah,
I live in the woods. You've been to my home, Wakil, in Montana. I live in the Blue Mountains. It's wild. It's beautiful. I'm out in it almost every single day of my life here. And I think, Andrew, you brought up a real thing about fear of all types, and I think it's essential that's the place where your journey begins. About death, and begin to look. For those, I know people don't make a lot of humor about Sigmund Freud, but one of the foundational parts of his theory had to do with Thanos. And I look at in our world right now today, can I say anything politically, or is that for
go for it?
It's on you.
So look, I don't know about podcasts. Okay, I'm doing this first one in my life. It's fascinating. But when we're talking about fear and death, I look at our government. I look at our president, who has probably the most profound fear of death I've ever seen in a public person, because of the need for recognition, constant. And it's reflective of an incredible fear of death, ultimately. And so that's a place that I think all of us have questions to ask ourselves and say, where can I dance with this fear and find somebody to walk with me through it and find a resolution that makes my heart not clench every time I think of my demise.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
when you talk, my wife was a hospice worker for a number of years, and then a hospice chaplain also. And your training that you just spoke to a minute ago, she had some of that same training. It seems to be maybe maybe across the board with hospice. I don't know, but I know she's, besides knowing me, and she's a psychologist also. She found it really valuable, and I kind of heard the same thing reflected in your voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to kind of double back to this fear of death and how it gets it blossoms in each one of us. It's the fear of an end. And what is the end? Well, for some of us it'll be the end of our corporal existence, and some of us it's the end of a divine relationship that could potentially be severed at some form of death. I mean, the Christians talk about, you sever your relationship, you are dead to God when you sin. So there is some of that fear in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that acknowledging, fearing aging, the end of youthful vigor, the end of dreaminess. I mean, there's so many aspects of death, like that lovely word that just means to change, to move into a different realm. And I think that it behooves all of us to think about what is the aspect of a death that we fear. And Saladin, you brought up the fear of not being recognized. It is a very real death fear, right?
Yeah. Right. It is. I mean, I think, in the work, the psychological work I've done over the years, I recognized at some point that goes back to the very first fear I ever had, which is that mom wouldn't show up, and the only way to make sure mom would show up is to make sure I got noticed. And so that goes, all the way through to the,
Yeah.
everything we do in life, making sure we're noticed. So it's that base fear that we won't be taken care of, that we won't live, that we'll actually die because we didn't get fed,
Mhm.
and so
And
it
it's
goes
not
all
the
the way
same
back
for
to that.
everybody, right? Like everybody has a different one.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
my
that's
initial
good
fear was being
that's good family systems psychology you're talking to, Wakil.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty true for most people.
Yeah. Adelisa, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to keep going. What are your challenges when you talk to people about death, Saladin?
Tuning into where they are. I mean, really, you have to let go of yourself. In anything, when you really want to be with somebody, the I am, the little I am, let it go. And so the challenge is being there, present, and not judging, and letting go of the judging and that critical nature that we tend to have. I mean, I've traveled a lot in my life. I've been over many places in the world, and the Western culture tends to have that in spades. I'm really aware of it here in our culture. And so it's letting go of that. It's letting go of your own frame of reference. Okay. I saw a T-shirt here a while back when I saw you, Wakil. In fact, that same day, I think, when I was over on the coast of Washington, and it said, everybody has a story that you don't know. And it, I think I don't think I'm paraphrasing it. I think I got that pretty close. But it's so true. It's so accurate. And so when you speak to somebody about their great fears and, as you were saying earlier, about their great grief, because we lost our son 16 years ago, our youngest. I mean, I understand. So I have a very wonderful, I do call it wonderful, relationship to grief. It's just part of my companion. But coming into that, you have to find a place where you can trust somebody, and you can trust them when you know they hear you, when you know that they're with you. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge from your question, is always trying to stay in the same breath as them, stay in the same frame of reference that they are in, and essentially work from your heart. Essentially, just work from your heart, and not so much your mind. Having a doctorate degree does not make it. Okay, it's much more than that.
Or even being older, right? Age does not make it either.
Yeah.
No, that's for sure.
Oh no, no. Donnie's 2 years younger than me, and he certainly doesn't have it. Sorry, I'll let that one go. You can get that one out of here.
We'll let Sam decide whether we should keep that part or not.
Okay.
Well, anyway, so I appreciate that a lot. I think that's really kind of, I mean, Ana Luisa and I met in seminary, and the practice that we were being trained in was spiritual direction,
Listening.
companionship. And really the number one thing is this sense of listening. Just somebody just the other day was saying, that's why God gave us 2 ears and one mouth, you know. You should shut up and listen, you know. And really being with people, that's the number one thing, is to just be in a state of compassion, caring, open-heartedness, and not trying to put your own, you know, not trying to figure out what you're going to say next, you know, just let it be. And we get to practice that here in our podcast too, just trying to let things flow in a way that, you know, that can really touch each other and touch our audience, etc. So, is there anything that you fear about the end of life yourself after having been through all this?
So, okay, I'm trying to make a very brief story, right?
Okay.
5 years ago, was it 5? Yeah, 5 years ago, I had a stroke. Okay. And I was having it. I was with a friend, talking to them, and they drove me home. We didn't know it was a stroke right then, but things were really bad. I get home, and Samia, my wife, says, "Oh my God, I got to get you to the ER." I'm in the doorway, and all of a sudden I'm realizing I can't speak very well. But I'm also realizing that cognitively, I'm functioning really well. I know exactly what's happening. I've had a pretty good medical background. I knew all of a sudden what was going on, that I had a stroke. And I thought, is this okay? And so I thought, well, I could have updated my will. That was my only concern.
Really, no.
Yeah. And then I thought, does everybody I love know I love them? That was the only question. I mean, it's the only thing that came to my mind. That was the only place I wanted to make sure that I had accomplished, is that, you know, I've known Wakil. I have no idea how many years, but decades. You know where my heart is with you, Wakil, even right now, in front of everybody in the nature. Right. And so when I knew that my heart, that most people knew where they were in my life, I have no problem with dying. It's not an issue for me. I don't say that flippantly. I don't say that with any type of grandiosity. It's just that I'm very, very comfortable with it. I know that it will be difficult for people who love me to a degree, especially my wife. You know, we've been together for a long time. Nonetheless, I'm really comfortable with it. I can speak to it with my friends. I can speak to it, obviously, with my family, my kids, my grandkids. You know, so I'm very fortunate to have kids and grandkids, and and I love them. But I'm 82. You know, I'm not, and I'm not ignorant. Okay, but I have no issue with it. So that's the best I can answer.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think that's. Yeah, I feel I feel the same way, and in a way, you know, when those things happen, it's like the divine has said, you know, check and make sure you got all your boxes done. You know, is there anything left? Here's an opportunity to go back and double check, right?
Do over.
So you got a chance.
Well, I've used your boxes to make sure I had all mine taken care of as far as the logistics go really well. I've really, people should hang out with you and make sure they got it together. Logistically, especially.
Yeah, I sent my checklist of end of life planning to Saladin a while back. So, yeah. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for the promo. I appreciate that. So, yeah.
So, Saladin, when you are in companion mode with others, specifically around death, how do you leave that space and take care of yourself?
That's a great question. It's my heart. I think it's anybody's heart, but if you're loving in the moment, then there's not a lot of places that you have to experience a tearing away from or escaping to. So I really, the element of Sufism that grabbed me in 1976 was, and I was just beginning to teach in yoga, in Vedanta yoga, meditation, pranayama, but I got captured by the heart focus. I realized how essential that was. And so is keeping the focus in the heart. Now, I know I'm not as I don't look warm and fuzzy maybe, or like, but it's always right here for me. And so
You
when
look warm
I'm
and
with
fuzzy.
people, hopefully I can be loving them, and really, so when I walk away, the one thing I want to walk away with is that they know that somebody cared, somebody was with them. And at one time in my professional career, I did a lot of forensic work. I saw people in prisons and jails and people who did crime. And even then, and some of them weren't very likable, but I tried to leave them with the impression that I was interested and cared about them. And so that makes most of the parting, for me at least, much easier.
Yeah.
If that
So
makes
take
sense.
care of yourself because,
Yeah.
it totally does. Yeah. Can take care of ourselves by being aware of what we are creating. That's great. I love that. It's really cool. Well, we're getting close
really
to the
good.
time, and I just want to make sure there's nothing else that you wish we had asked you about that you'd like to share.
Not really. I'm just going to say that what would I want you to ask me? I don't know. It really boils down to the heart. It boils down to saying it's okay to be frightened, but it's really important, if you find that you're frightened, that you want to follow through to that thread to find out where's the genesis of it. Okay, where's the genesis, and then find a dance that helps you understand that, and be able to live with it or resolve it. That's just really what I have to say. Is that
excellent? Thank you. And you sent us that poem by Rabia. Would you like to read it, or you want us to?
Oh, I'd love to hear somebody else read. I read it all the time. I quote it. I know it. So yeah. But please, go for it. You have a great voice, both of you. So either one of you.
We like to read them twice sometimes. This is fairly short, so why don't we do that?
Why don't you go ahead and start,
All right. This is by Rabia, a mystic. How long? When was she writing? Do you remember, Saladin?
Yeah,
it's like the 6th.
She was in the 8th. I don't remember the exact date. She was in the 9th century, which would be the 800s.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, beautiful Sufi poet. Here's her words. Ironic, but one of the most intimate acts of our body is death. So beautiful appeared my death, knowing who then I would kiss. I died 1,000 times before I died. Die before you die, said the Prophet Muhammad. Have wings that feared ever touch the sun. Let's try that again. Have wings that feared ever touch the sun. I was born when all I once feared I could love. Yeah. So we'll do that again.
Ironic, but one of the most intimate acts of our body is death. So beautiful appeared my death, knowing who then I would kiss. I died 1,000 times before I died. Die before you die, said the Prophet Muhammad. have wings that feared ever touch the sun. I was born when all I once feared I could love.
Beautiful. That's a translation
Mhm.
by Daniel Ladinsky. So thank you
Yes.
so much for Daniel, all his work. So thank you, Saladin. It's been a wonderful time to get to learn more about your work, and we
Mhm.
appreciate you. We appreciate all you do, and
Well,
we'll
thank you.
be in
Thank you
touch.
for teaching me about podcasts. I'm now I've got to see them. Now I've got to look at them. Okay.
Yeah, now you
Yep.
got to
Well,
see
now
them.
you're a neophyte in the podcast world, but here you go.
There
Yeah.
I
We
go.
just kicked
Yes.
you into the 21st century.
That's a little scary, but okay.
Conversations about the end of life.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you.